To what the political class has chimed in thus far on this situation. We'll share with you the first clip that we have from Justin Trudeau. So let's just throw to that quickly, and we'll get to a couple more before we end for the day.
Canada unequivocally and in the strongest possible terms condemns these terrorist attacks perpetrated by Hamas. We stand with Israel and reaffirm our support for Israel's right to defend itself in accordance with international law. The attacks this weekend were brutal and horrific. We heard stories of people who were there at the music festival for peace when gunmen started shooting. We saw images of parents shielding their children to protect them from rockets. Women and kids have been forced out of their homes and kidnapped. Images and the imagining what it must have been. Middle of the night as doors were kicked in, people ripped from their beds. It's unimaginable. We know that even Holocaust survivors were kidnapped. The indiscriminate killing of civilians, the sexual violence, the violence against women, children, and elderly people, these acts are sickening and completely unimaginable. The glorification of death and violence and terror has no place anywhere, including, especially, here in Canada. So let me be very clear. Hamas terrorists aren't a resistance. They're not freedom fighters. They are terrorists, and no one in Canada should be supporting them, much less celebrating them.
So what about CUPE? Justin Trudeau, what about CUPE?
Well, I would say two things. I guess it's true, Tamara Ugolini, what they say. Even a broken clock is correct twice a day. But on the other hand, what has my spidey senses tingling a bit is that line where we're going to stand with Israel to defend itself in accordance with international law. Mm-hmm. And words matter because already I heard an interview, I can't remember the individual's name, it was a commentator on Middle East affairs, who was already suggesting that Israel, by preventing electricity, fuel, and food to go into Gaza, could fit the definition of a war crime. So without firing a single bullet, just this siege in order to, have Hamas at bay is considered a war crime. Is this what Blackface is inferring here in terms of in accordance with international law, that Israel yet again has to fight with one hand tied behind its back? I don't think it's going to happen. I think the country, the government, Netanyahu, really, they don't give a rodent's rectum what the world community has to say, or what the UN has to say, or the international law has to say. They have to defend themselves by any means necessary. And based on what happened on the weekend, Tamara Ugolini, can you blame them?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I want to contrast that as well with what Leader of the Opposition, Pierre Poilievre, had to say, which we also have a short clip to. And I think after that one, maybe we'll try to get to Melanie Joly's. I noticed that our battery's dying here as well. So we'll have to be mindful of that. But here, let's throw to Leader of the Opposition, Pierre Poilievre, and his condemnation.
In starting my remarks tonight, let me be explicitly clear. Hamas is not a militant organization. It is not an activist organization. It is surely not a government. It is a sadistic, demonic, genocidal, terrorist death cult, and it must be defeated and destroyed. In starting...
Yeah, Tamara, I urge our viewers to check out Mr. Poilievre's speech because it's about 7 minutes long, I do believe, and he nailed it. He hit it out of the ballpark. It was so refreshing, the honesty there. And maybe we should compare Pierre Poilievre weighing in with Melanie Joly, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the mealy-mouthed words she had to say about this. We're just going to look for that clip, folks.
Yeah, and I love how succinct Pierre Poilievre can be. Like, Justin Trudeau is just always so emotive and drawing on those emotions, and this is why I always like to contrast how Pierre Poilievre responds, because it's very pointed, very succinct, very logic, rational, reasonable approach versus Justin Trudeau breathless emotion that he just can't seem to curtail. Anyway, let's show this Joly clip.
You called these attacks terror attacks. Canada designated Hamas as a terrorist organization about 20 years ago. But there were protests across Canada this weekend and even today, in some ways celebrating the Hamas attacks that you've decried. There have been calls for your government to condemn these protests here in Canada. Will you do that?
Well, we know that according to Canadian law, the Hamas is a terrorist organization. So, of course, we don't support it. And at the same time, we've always been clear when it comes to our relationship with Israel. So the position of our government stands. At the same time, there have been hostages. The hostages must be released. And like I said, civilian lives must be protected. So these will be difficult days ahead, and right now and ahead, for Israeli people, for Palestinian people, for Canadians, for the world. And you Canadians can know that the government and the Prime Minister and myself are absolutely engaged 24/7 on this issue.
But Minister, what do you say to Canadians or other people in this country who might go to a protest that critics say is purporting to celebrate what Hamas has done? I mean, should these protests be happening? There have been some calls by others to maybe find a way to prosecute this over supporting terrorism. I don't know if it goes that far or not, in your view. But what is your message to Canadians that might attend these protests, given what's happened in the last 48 hours or so?
No, we don't support Hamas. We don't support also what they've done. And we don't support hate speech. That's what I can tell you. And meanwhile, of course, the Minister of Public Safety will do its work working with local authorities.
But do you condemn the protests, Minister? I guess that's what I'm trying to understand. There have been calls directly for the Prime Minister to do it. Because he's not here, I'm going to ask you.
But David, I'm answering your question. Of course, we can't support the celebration of Hamas terrorist attack. Of course we don't. So we don't.
The double speak, right? We can't support it, but we also can't condemn it. It's this political double speak. It's really bizarre. And maybe she just didn't fully have her talking points ready.
What a lightweight. And wow, he had to, I'll give kudos to that CBC journalist. Geez, there must be a blue moon in orbit right now. I mean, he was trying to get her to come out and answer that question. It looked like about 3 attempts, Tamara. And it's funny too, at the Solidarity for Israel gathering last night, one of the speakers was Toronto Liberal MP Yara Sachs. She's the one that infamously said that honking your horn twice, honk honk, is an acronym. I mean, what a moron. Yes. She doesn't even know what an acronym is, but is an acronym for Heil Hitler. I wonder, now at Mel Lastman Square, as I mentioned, for security reasons, Yonge Street was closed to vehicle traffic, so there was zero honking. But there was plenty of honking downtown Toronto 5 hours earlier by the pro-Hamas people. Is Yara Sachs going to call them Nazis or neo-Nazis or Islamo-Nazis for their horn honking? Or does that just pertain to the Freedom Convoy folk? What a disgrace.
Yeah, and I'm actually surprised to see that pushback from CBC journalists, especially after they were instructed not to refer to these attacks or Hamas as terrorists. So the CBC, I can't imagine what they're doing, and the frenzy that they must be in today on Tuesday after hearing Justin Trudeau denounce that using strong, harsh language like terrorist.
Yes.
And now the CBC, they must be in a frenzy trying to figure out their journalistic stance and what were they called? They were calling it their journalistic let me just pull it up to find the exact wording here, standards, their journalistic standards on whether or not they should refer to a Hamas gunman as terrorist, which they were previously instructed not to. So let's see if there's a change there in their standard after hearing the way that the political sphere has denounced these unfoldings.
Hey, I got to tell you, I'm going on a cruise with a whole bunch of rebels. We're sailing out of Fort Lauderdale on March 23rd, 2024. That's not so far away, less than 6 months away. A gorgeous trip around the Caribbean. Holland America Line, boy, is that luxurious. And we're going to bring some of our favorite rebel talent. Sheila Gunn Reid, David Menzies, and can you believe it? We're actually bringing Tamara Leach with us, and you are invited. That's rebelnewscruise.com.